Hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining us at this lunchtime session on what sadly is the final day of ESOC 2022. I'm Jess Dawson from the University of Glasgow in Scotland, and I'm delighted to be joined today by three friends and colleagues. My co-host today is Elsa Sandset, who's the Secretary General of ESO that many of you will know from Oslo in Norway. Peter Kelly, who, again, all of you will know is the president of the Society, so we need to be on our best behaviour during this session, and congratulations on taking over. And then by Hannah Christensen, who's from Copenhagen in Denmark. And we've got quite a few different topics to cover, so I think it will be quite interesting. And we're going to start by talking about one of, I think, what is one of the key initiatives for improving the quality of stroke care in Europe. So over to you, Elsa.
Yeah, I think first I have to say it's been a great conference so far, and I agree with you, Jessie, that it's a bit sad it's the last day, but hopefully we'll be able to meet again soon. But on to the SAP-E, and Hannah, you've been working quite closely on the SAP-E for several years. And what has your experiences with SAP-E been, and what have been your surprises and major highlights of your work so far?
Oh, it's been a journey. It's really been a journey following the others who went down the journey of improving quality of stroke care before us, starting with the Helsingborg Declaration and following ESO East and all the other initiatives working that way. And I can clearly say what was the biggest surprise for us. That was COVID. Because when we started this program, everything was closed down, so this turned into be an online event which nobody had experienced. But following that nasty surprise, the good surprise was the massive support we've seen from almost all countries. And Europe is big, Europe is diverse, but everybody have agreed on our common target to decrease the burden of stroke in Europe. So basically for me, this has been a personally very exciting journey surrounded by people walking the same way as myself.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Peter, you have also worked quite closely with Hannah on the SAP-E. And what have been the highlights of your work with SAP-E so far?
Well,
and also with you, surprises.
One of the big highlights has been working with Hannah, I would say. So the very first thing that has to be said is we all at ESO and in our ESO member countries owe a huge thanks to Hannah for the energy and leadership that she has provided, and also the two co-chairs of SAP-E, Francesca Romana Pizzella and Arlene Wilkie, representing SAFE. Those of you perhaps not entirely familiar with all the details of the SAP-E program may not know that SAP-E is actually a partnership between ESO and the main European patient support organization, the Stroke Alliance for Europe. And it has been wonderful working with SAFE. We have gotten to know each other. We have formed a very effective partnership day to day, week to week. And it makes no sense to try to do quality improvement and lobby and advocate with ministries of health without having the patients with us. So for me, that has been a really fundamental thing that we have done with SAP-E, but really down to the energy and commitment of our leadership with Hannah, and then also at national level, which I'm sure Hannah will tell us a little more about.
Because SAP-E is based on the steering committee giving tools, but the countries actually doing the work. Mm-hmm. The countries are represented by the national coordinators who come both from the patient support organizations as well as from the scientific societies, following up on the structure that you described, that this is a common project coming out of both ESO and SAFE. And they are doing the work. Those are the ones that go to their ministries of health to have the declaration signed. Those are the ones who on a daily basis work to improve stroke care in their countries. And problems are different in different countries. Some countries still have problems with the acute care, but as I see it, one of the most surprising things to me was that rehabilitation, life after stroke in Europe, is really suffering. It's not available for the majority of patients. Actually, it's only available for a minority of patients. And that is one of our major targets in SAP-E.
Can I just ask how, there's obviously, for such a major initiative, there must be a political element in terms of liaising with the European Parliament or with, tell us a bit about that side of the work.
Well, we started out by setting up a strategic network where we have been endorsed by a World Stroke Organization. ESO has entered in as an unofficial partner of WHO. We are working with the other existing quality initiatives, including ESO, East, Angels, Rescue, etc. So we're going the whole way around the area. We are now also entered into working with the EU. And we've been strongly supported in this by the experience of SAFE that have much more experience in that way than we have. And also our national coordinators have been trained by SAFE in advocacy to be better at approaching their ministries of health.
Yeah.
Yeah,
interesting.
It's an art in itself, I think. The skill of advocacy and advocating well and representing well. So I think of it at kind of two levels. You can think of it as a network or as a hierarchical thing, but at national level, I think it's about making these partnerships between professional organizations, stroke support patient organizations, and crucially the national ministries of health, the people with the responsibility at national level. And if we can get those three working together to start working and funding and monitoring and implementing stroke plans at a national level, we're on the road. Now, how can ESO then really facilitate and leverage its voice? I think we probably have work to do at the EU level, and there have been some very encouraging initiatives in recent times in terms of advocating at EU level, but there's much more that we can do. So that's a job for the next few years. Yeah,
and the plan covers all aspects of stroke care. And you mentioned rehabilitation. Do you see that as the toughest nut to crack, to improve?
I think at the moment it might be, just to make it clear, SAP-E covers the entire chain of care for stroke, from primary prevention to life after stroke. During this process, I had one-to-ones with all the national coordinators. So basically I talked for 1 hour to each of the coordinators from 44 countries to learn about the status in their country. And that's where I learned that rehabilitation is not something people can just expect. It's something that people, their relatives and their doctors have to fight for. Yeah. But of course, it's not the only issue, but for me this was a surprise.
Yeah.
And Hanna, you've had these talks with the national coordinators from 44 countries, and you've had them on Zoom. Yes. How has it been during this conference, meeting all of these people in person, or many of them?
Well, I mean, it's been kind of emotional because there's something very intense or intimate about Zoom, talking on Zoom for a long time, because you're sitting in your own home with your slippers on, so you can't get close to these people. And I hadn't spoken to many of them before. So a lot of them were new friends. So for me, this has been an emotional experience, a very positive emotional experience.
And tell me a bit about the events that you have during the conference here with the SAP-E.
We started out with the SAP-E symposium, following directly after the ESO East Day meeting, where all international investigators from SAP-E were invited to come. And we went over what we'd already done, with focus on sharing experiences, and those who have already done something impressive had the chance of presenting it to the others, or rather that the others had the chance of hearing it. We also gave out awards to some of all those who have really done something great that is an example for the others. And then finally we had dinner together and got even closer to knowing each other. So that was the first day, which was really important. And then we have had the SAP-E booth, where many of the national coordinators have come to discuss practical issues, ask questions, get into contact with somebody. So basically, we've been in contact all over the conference time.
And so you mentioned some awards there. Give us an example of, just for the viewers, of one of the things that really struck out as being a major breakthrough.
Oh, there's so many things. So now I have to choose one. What just comes to my mind, and this may not this is not something that is Armenia, because we were so impressed by what Armenia has achieved in collaboration with ESO East, working from basically nothing to having actually really good basic acute care. They have uploaded their data to Stroke Service Tracker. But that is what came to my mind, and our impression is that this is carried by somebody who really wants to make change, and we want to reward that, because that is where change comes from.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things maybe people aren't quite aware of, is there a time horizon? You know, when are you, what's the kind of quantitative goal, and when do you hope to hit it by?
I mean, the overarching target in SAP E is by 2030. And of course, I mean, when do we want improvement? Rather now than tomorrow. But this is something which is work in progress. We need to say every day should be better. Everything should be improved day by day. But we're saying by 2030. And should we go further than some of our targets, I mean, that would be great. Personally, I think we're probably going to go further as to the IVT rate, which we set at 10%. And I think we're going to break that. Other things will be much more difficult.
I mean, the area I think is really interesting that possibly doesn't have the prominence in conferences that it should have is primary prevention, and how we at population level get people healthier. What sort of things does the plan suggest for that?
Well, the plan suggests the usual things. Campaigns. We have the issue that there's no real hard evidence on screening programs. But what we see is that very few countries, if any, I don't think any actually, have a plan installed for primary prevention with focus on stroke. And people think that they should eat better, have their blood pressure reduced in order to prevent having cardiac disease. And of course this is important. I mean, nobody should have an MI. But to think stroke in how you live your life to have your blood pressure controlled. People need to be educated about that, because nobody wants to have a stroke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Starting with the politicians.
Oh, yes.
Starting with the politicians. So the primary, you've hit on probably the most ambitious goal, I think, of the SAP-E, which is to have multi-sectoral national or possibly international plans and strategies to reduce the burden of stroke and other cardiovascular diseases in general. So this cuts right across outside health into the built environment, into education for children, etc. In terms of good dietary habits, education, as I mentioned, built environment, importance of exercise, etc. So it's very ambitious. But it starts with a plan, and it starts by naming what we want. We will never get to our destination if we don't identify where our destination is. And then we will have early adopters. We will have the bad ones in the class, but we don't want to focus on those too much. But the early adopters will provide wonderful demonstration potential. And we see it's a natural human instinct when we see our colleagues doing things well, other countries doing things well. This goes at political level as well. They will, there is a natural tendency to say, well, if it can be done here, it can be done here. We saw this with national smoking bans, for example. They are now the norm, whereas they were the exception.
And they work.
And they had to start somewhere. They were considered unfeasible at the start.
And Ireland was the first in Europe.
We were early.
You were the first in Europe.
Maybe not the first in the world.
In Europe,
Yes. And we had a big fight about it, but we got there.
And it works.
It works wonderfully. Yes.
And as part of the action plan for stroke in Europe, we're providing the Stroke Service Tracker, which will actually monitor this as well as the other aims, other targets of SAP-E, which will enable the countries to look at their development over time, but also to compare to neighbours. And that is, in my opinion, extremely useful for advocacy, because if you can point at the other countries and say, they have a plan, why don't we? That is something which works with politicians.
Absolutely.
And I think the final point then, just to cover in this section, is what should the people watching do? What do you want the guys out there, what do you want us to go away and do tomorrow with regard to SAP? I mean, obviously read it, but what can individuals do to help you?
Individuals can, in their individual countries, join and assist their national coordinators in making this happen.
Yeah.
Because the national coordinators, they will coordinate within their country. They will have the contact to MOA, to ministries of health. But they will need support from all regions in their own countries. So back up your national coordinators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and on that note, I think we will move on. And we will move on with some Congress highlights. And first, I would like to introduce a video showing Lyon and the conference.
I'm delighted to welcome everyone here to ESOC 2022 in Lyon.
ESOC is a forum to drive and build a momentum.
ESOC means to me
inspiration,
Magic.
Meeting friends.
connections,
enthused,
Exciting.
exchange knowledge.
München.
ESO is a force for advancing knowledge.
I'm from Argentina.
I'm from Nigeria.
I'm from China.
French.
I'm from Australia, first time overseas in 2.5 years, so I'm very, very excited, very happy to be here.
Déjà, c'est super cool.
Intéressant.
It was a good experience.
Going back with all the people here again after a lot of time.
Well, it's just, the conference to be.